everybody. It's Helen Lacey here from Smart Technologies. What we're going to do today is start our Smart Notebook webinar. And today the presenter will be Helen Lacey and the moderator will be Crystal Ryan. Crystal will answer any questions that you have, so please feel free to elaborate and type any questions into the question box on the GoToWebinar window that we have highlighted here. Okay, so this afternoon's presentation is all about Smart Notebook software. Smart Notebook software being the lesson creation software of choice in Australia, and what we're hoping to do today is some small revisions on Smart Notebook software and also have a discussion around the new features in 16.2 and some of the revise some of the features that you may have used previously that are now included in the 16.2 Smart Learning Suite. So what we all know is we all know about Smart Notebook software. That Smart Notebook software is just one component of the Smart Learning Suite, or as we like to call it, SLS. And the Smart Learning Suite is made up of 4 components, and the 4 key components of Smart Notebook software is Smart Notebook, Smart Lab, which is a gamification piece, Smart Response, which is an assessment and data and analytics part, and Smart AMP, which is a collaboration tool that's used for students and teachers to work in real time in a digital space. So today's session is just focusing on Smart Notebook as one of the 4 components of the Smart Learning Suite, and the Smart Notebook that has had 22 years of development and sits in 175 countries and 2.4 million classrooms and over 50 million teachers and students using it around the globe. So before I even start, it would be most pertinent for us to talk about what's already available with all of that experience that we have around the globe in Smart Notebook software. So I'm just selecting the gallery tool, and I'm able to access the Smart Exchange through the gallery toolbar here. And if I click on the Smart Exchange, I'm able to actually view with my Australian view any smart notebooks that have been created throughout Australia, and I can actually access content that has been aligned to Australian education standards. So if I am actually looking at the National Australian Curriculum, I can select the Australian Curriculum, I can select year groups, and I can select subject matters, and I can actually view the outcomes for those particular standards aligned to the Australian Curriculum. And then I can actually drill down and view the resources that the Smart Exchange already have relating to the standards that are set by the Australian Curriculum. And you would have noticed that, in fact, if you are choosing standards for a specific state or territory, you can actually do exactly the same thing. So we can look at the Queensland Standards of Education, we can select a year group and a subject matter, and we can actually view all content aligned to the standards that are available for other states and territories as well. So knowing that Smart has this vast array of experience and this vast area of content, and we can actually tell you that from Australian teachers contributed to the Smart Exchange, there are over 18,000 pieces of Australian content. So if you're looking for Smart Notebook resources to use in your classroom, the first place to go would be the Smart Exchange. Okay, moving on. So what we know about Smart Notebook is that Smart Notebook is familiar, relevant, and a good creation tool. It's authentic learning, and it really lends itself to being used in a flipped classroom. But we also know that we have, as part of the Smart Learning Suite, AMP, and AMP is that whole piece of gamification and quantified self and the flipped learning where students can actually go away and create resource games resources in lab that they can actually use in the classroom. We also have response, and that's definitely thinking about learning analytics and that quantified self and the formal and informal ways of assessing students and learning outcomes. And response is definitely the collaboration piece, and project-based learning lends itself very well to being used in a response in an AMP digital space. So by actually working in an AMP digital space, we can actually develop a project or have some authentic learning where the students can contribute into that digital space, fostering creativity and experimentation, and actually creating some content digitally rather than a paper version of that collaboration. So before we move on and really drill down into Smart Notebook, I'd like to understand first of all, of the people we have online right now, how frequently or when did you last use Smart Notebook, and also what did you use it for? So if you have a phone or an alternate mobile device, I'd like you to please navigate to classlab.com using your web browser, and once you've navigated to classlab.com, I'd like you to put in my teacher number that's associated with me as a teacher, and hopefully I will see some of your contributions shortly as you log on to that particular site and you see my questions, which are when did you use Smart Notebook last and what version of Smart Notebook you're using. So well done, Zach. Zach's already joined us here, as Isabel, and as you look at this ClassLab activity through your device, you will actually be able to select contributions. You would actually be able to type answers and choose which category you're answering for, so make sure you're answering the right question and send your contributions through to me, and as you send your contributions through, I'll be able to see them. So when did you last use Smart Notebook today? Well done, Tom. Great. Glad to hear that you've used it in the classroom, and hopefully you'll see some new and exciting things today. And Tom's using 16.2 and Molly's used it today too. Fantastic. Brilliant. So as I see your contributions coming through, and how exciting, we've got everybody so far has used it today. We've got some people on version 14.3, some people using it last month, so hopefully this is a good update for you guys. 5 years ago, Nick, wow, so hopefully what you're going to see is some really interesting pieces. And as you can see, I've got live updates of everything that you're contributing, and I'm actually able to move these around and categorize them into everybody who's used it today, and people who've used it a while ago, and people who've used it a long time ago. So good to see that we've got so many frequent users, and interesting for us to see that, okay, last week, not using it much this year in the library as I did with my own class, or maybe we can give you some good ideas for using it in the library too. And also really interesting to see that we've got some new versions of Smart Notebook here with these guys, and we've also got some older versions. So back here we've got Notebook 11 being used. So really for you guys this will be a very important exercise in you seeing the differences between older versions of Smart Notebook and what you actually now get when you purchase the Smart Learning Suite. So thank you very much for your contributions. It's really great to see and gives me a good guide on where to pitch things and make sure that you're going to get as much information as you possibly can from this session. So thanks for that. So what I wanted to do today is talk to you about previous use of Smart Notebook and ways that we see Smart Notebook being used today. So a very typical example of the sorts of notebooks that we might see on the Smart Exchange is here with this lesson in astronomy. And during the course of this lesson it may have been a unit of work or a three-part lesson where the teacher has compiled a series of interactive activities and involved some dress-up games and lesson activities and some pages linked by spinners that we can actually access the spinners from the gallery, and we can navigate to information on another page using linked pages. So this is very much a standard, typical kind of smart notebook that might have been created to interact with in lessons more recently. And what we're going to look at in this particular session today is understanding the pen integration in this smart notebook 16.2, and also thinking about how we embed YouTube videos in 16.2 and using some of the add-ons. And we'll touch on some of these features today, and we'll drill down into more of the features as we do more and more of the webinars. We're also going to look at some of the alternate uses of Smart Notebook and other approaches of using Smart Notebook. So people who are actually uploading student content and capturing learning journeys and using Smart Notebook as an aid to and a reflection of the learning that's taking place in the classroom at that particular time. So these teachers often capture everything they're doing, maybe using other pieces of technology, maybe integrating 3D printers, or maybe integrating Minecraft, and they use Smart Notebook to capture all of the record of that particular learning journey. And then specifically today what we'll look at are things like transparency and cloning, and using the Smart Recorder and the Lesson Recorder, which are really key in today's world where students are really keen to YouTube things or to vlog, and quite a lot of them are very much interested in presenting their view of the world and their understanding by actually showing videos of their learning. So we'll do that today as well. Okay, so starting with Smart Notebook and the Smart Notebook that I'm using here right now today. And one of the key things when we're using Smart Notebook is to make sure that we are comfortable with how our notebook page is set up. One of the most obvious ways to do this is obviously to make sure that your toolbar addresses your needs. So if I hold my pen onto, or my finger onto the toolbar for 3 seconds, I get a right click, and I actually can choose what I would like to add to my smart toolbar that I use very frequently. So I'm a big fan of the Smart Recorder, so I'm going to add the Smart Recorder to my toolbar. And I also like to use the capture tool because I like to capture things and cut them out from different things that I see. So I'm actually going to use my screen capture and pop that up into the toolbar as well. So you can also delete things that you don't use frequently. So if you're not a secondary maths teacher and you don't want maths tools, you can actually move those out of your toolbar, but it's a good idea to have everything that you use frequently up in your toolbar to start your sessions. The second thing I would suggest is that you also make sure that your gallery items, so I'm choosing the second tab down, which is the gallery items just here, are just what you need. So we all know that there are 6,685 items in the gallery, and making sure that you have relevant content for your teaching needs is most important. So maybe dropping items that you use regularly into My Content will actually speed up the sorts of searches that you may frequently do in Smart Notebook, and you can add any content into My Content and search just that file, which would make it much quicker and easier for you. And the next thing I'm actually going to just remind you on is this add-in tab. So if you've been using an older version of Smart Notebook, you wouldn't have seen this little puzzle piece tab at the bottom here. And this puzzle piece tab refers to add-ons. And some add-ons you are actually required to download. So you can see we've got an image search and activity builder and smart blocks and YouTube and GeoGebra in there. They're typical add-ons that appear as default, but you may want to add things like the Lesson Recorder and Notebook Maestro. So if you click on the little settings cog there, you can actually decide which other add-ons you would like to add. So I've added Notebook Maestro, and Notebook Maestro is actually allows me to run an open notebook on a remote application like an iPad. So Notebook Maestro may be used on iPad, and that for me is something that I would organize myself and use quite frequently. So hopefully you can set up your Smart Notebook so that you've got all the tools that you need in your toolbar, your gallery with all the content you regularly use, and the add-ons that you would use frequently in that space as well. I can see the chat bar flashing there. Crystal, were there any questions?
No questions yet, Helen.
Okay, good, great. Okay, so let's moving on from that, and let's have a look a little bit further down here. So one of the key things that we may have used in the notebook that you just saw on the galleries is the screen shade. So again, the screen shade resides at the top of your page in the toolbar just here, so you can see it highlighted there, and I can move the screen shade from top to bottom and right to left, and I can also change the color of the screen shade by tapping on the screen shade till I find a color that I deem appropriate for my setting. So as we reveal the sorts of things that we may be revealing in the course of the class, we might ask certain questions, but we could also use the magic pen to highlight certain things. So I'm selecting the pens from the pen tray, and I'm choosing my magic pen from the text options I've got here. And the magic pen actually gives me 3 functions. So the first function that it could give me is to spotlight or highlight something. So if I draw a circle, I'm actually going to get a little highlight tool, and I'm able to highlight and move my spotlight where I choose to go. So I could be looking at the big storm that exists on Jupiter, or I might move to look at Saturn's rings with my highlighted pen. So that's the first one. The second thing I could do is I could actually draw a square, and the square, if I drew it beautifully, which I didn't draw it beautifully, so I'll just erase that square and we'll try again. Okay, so I'm just going to go to the pen, and I'm going to draw a better square this time, and that gives me a magnifier, and I can actually zoom in on my magnifier again, and we could talk about dust in a comet and what we see in the tail of a comet if I really wanted to zoom in on the magnifier. And the third thing that the magic pen does, and we've seen a little bit of this earlier on, is I might talk to the students and give them an answer about what our sun actually is, and as I've written the answer, I then may refer back to the students and say, can you remember what I'd written and what we actually call our sun? And as you can see, the notes have actually vanished, because the magic pen also allows I'll also make sure that any annotations vanish after you've written them after a few seconds. So those are the 3 functions of the magic pen. You actually have vanishing ink, you have a magnifier when you draw a square, and you have a spotlight when you draw a circle. So some of the key features of the newer version of Smart Notebook. We also have something called a text pen. So I'm selecting once again from the pen selections, I'm choosing the text pen, and what the text pen actually allows me to do is edit anything that's written in text on the screen. So using my pen on my smart board, I can see that on this last word here, solar system, there needs to be a gap between the solar and system. So if I draw a line between those spaces, hopefully a gap will appear. There we go. And I can also know, if I was reading this text very carefully, that in fact 96% of all the material in the solar system is incorrect, and it is actually 98%. So I'm going to write 98%. I'm going to cross that out, and I'm going to insert 98%, and I'm going to select that, and I can actually edit on screen on the smartboard. So I can cross things out and they'll vanish. I can actually put a line between things and hopefully the gaps will appear. I can circle something and decide that I actually want to replace that whole thing with solar system maybe. And and it will recognize my text and add that into that space. So the text pen has 4 key functions. The first function is you can circle and replace a word. The second function is that you can cross out and a word will disappear. The third function is you can draw a line and that will create a gap. And the fourth function is that you can insert or add an alternate word into that space if you wanted to, and select that. Okay, so that's the text pen and all the things to do with the text pen in those spaces. Another of the key features of software that's used very frequently is within the add-ons. So back to the puzzle piece tab here on the left-hand side, and one of the add-ons I can actually choose is Smart Blocks. And Smart Blocks are dynamic interactive maths tools. So I've obviously got an addition block and a subtraction and multiplication and division, but I also have power blocks, square root blocks, and blocks where the students actually have to decide what operation may apply within that box. So to give you an indication of what happens here, I can actually drag out an addition box, and I'm going to choose my pen, and as I add 1 plus 3 into here, oops, not having much luck with this, I'm going to erase that and start again. What it will do is hopefully recognize my writing and be able to add these numbers up. Maybe my addition block is not going to do that today. We'll try a multiplication block. And what I've done with this multiplication block is I've actually got some objects that are grouped, and hopefully we'll be able to demonstrate that the blocks can recognize individual objects as well as numbers. But we're not having any of that today, and I think it's probably because I'm not actually on a smartboard and I'm using a Symposium. But usually when we're on a smartboard, we'll definitely be able to make sure that this works. So you're going to have to take my word for it today. Apologies for that. Okay, as well as some of the Smart Blocks tools that we have there, we actually have some objects within the gallery that are 3D tools. So if I was focusing on space and I wanted to research objects and gallery items that I have relating to space, I might decide that I can choose a space suit to look at in detail, maybe as a 3D object. And I can hold on to the little toolbar that I've got here, and I'm able to navigate my spaceman around and look at him within a 3D context. And if I wanted to label my spaceman, I can hold my finger on the board for 3 seconds and I can get to add a label, and I might decide that this label is for a moon boot. So I'm writing moon boot here, and I might want to add that text. I want to add this text into my label. My label resizes accordingly, and even as I move my spaceman around, my label is sticky and stays on his moon boot in that particular setting. So as I navigate my way around the man, I've got moon boot here, and I can move the label out of the way. If I chose to move the label out of the way, we can move the label away from there. I might decide that I want to actually recognize some of my writing as text, so right click, add a label, and I'm going to write flag here. So using my pen tool, I'm going to write flag, and I'm going to select that and recognize this as text, and then I'm going to drop that text into that label. And again, I'm going to move this label over here because it's quite big, and once again, as I move my man around, I can actually have those sticky labels in place just there too. So 3D objects, there are lots of 3D objects available now. SMART has a direct link to the Trimble 3D warehouse where you can access 3D objects online. It's just quite important to check which file format you're using for those 3D objects. The ones that are obviously part of the gallery will play seamlessly within SMART Notebook. But if you're searching for new objects within the 3D warehouse, you need to ensure that they're the correct format to work within SMART Notebook. Okay, so that's really covering off on the main key features of text recognition and text pens and smart blocks and 3D objects. Back to the whole idea of adding student content. So, excuse me. As students create content, it's a really great idea to have the content visible for students in a classroom. And being able to scan in their own pictures and their own images is something that lots of children, lots of students really enjoy seeing. So lots of ways to insert images from students, obviously emailing pictures to yourself, but you can also insert from the Insert tab a picture from a scanner or 3D object or anything else that you've created. So this image, if I just delete this one, is actually sitting on my desktop here, so I can right click and copy this image, and when I go back to my Smart Notebook I can right click and paste the image into this notebook space. Now obviously as it was scanned in, this was a very large image, so I'm resizing it using my resizable handle here, and this little activity was done for Clean Up Australia Day, and the students were talking about how they had actually cleaned up their local area. I'm going to order this one and bring it forward. So we've got a little girl here and she's going to tell us the story about Clean Up Australia Day. So no better way for the students to reenact what they learned about this than to actually have their work and manipulate their work at the board to show what they've learned. So if I move this object onto, I'm just going to bring this forward again, so bringing this to the front. If I move this object onto my background, I can see that I've got the paper behind the little girl, which I don't want to be able to see, to be able to tell, for the students to tell the story of Clean Up Australia Day. So using the drop-down menu, I can actually go to Set Image Transparency, and I can hide the background pieces that I don't want visible, and click on OK, and now my little girl can walk across and do her cleanup jobs that she had for Clean Up Australia Day. And so these little items here, which I need to reorder because they're going to slip behind the background, so I'm going to go to Order and Bring to the front. These items here are the objects that she's cleaned up from the local creek, and what I can do is I can actually clone these images, and I could resize them if I chose to resize them to tell the story and maybe pop them in her bag, or I could even infinitely clone if I wanted to show that there was a lot of rubbish that needed to get cleaned up, and maybe the students are talking about that content. So some really great practice I've seen where students are able to stand up the board and the teacher is actually able to record the students' understanding of what they've learned that day. And to do that, they use the Smart Recorder. So if a student, as an example, is retelling what happened on Clean Up Australia Day, we can actually go to our add-ons here, and I'm just going back to my 4-field tab, and I might click on the lesson recorder and I can create a new recording. So when I start recording, everything I write or I do within the notebook space is actually being recorded. So as the student may tell how they went along and collected all of the objects and put them in the bag for Clean Up Australia Day, it's going to actually record all of my actions. So I've just stopped that recording and I can actually play it back and see what was written and what was what happened in that particular scenario. So imagine the students doing a complex maths problem, and the students are actually recording their methodology of that, and then a classroom discussion ensues about how that methodology came about. Or equally, students could use, sorry, I've just zoomed back, the smart recorder. So the lesson recorder sits within the tabs and the add-ons of the little puzzle piece, but also you have access in the toolbar at the very bottom to something called the smart recorder. So if I right-click on this and I launch the smart recorder, I'm actually able to record voice, provided that my laptop that I'm using has a microphone, and this little boy here actually has a handheld microphone that he's using to record his voice, and I can actually record everything I do on the page. So it may be outside of Smart Notebook and on the internet, or over PowerPoint, or over Word, or over Excel. And just by clicking this button, I create a small recording, and the students can record their learning. So this young man here was recording what he had learnt about a particular spelling rule, and he thoroughly enjoyed describing the sort of spelling rule that he had, explaining the spelling rule that he'd learnt that particular day, and he went away on the internet and created a GIF. So I'm not going to play that for you because unfortunately I think I'm pushing, oh yeah, here we go.
Every day. I'm in. Come on, Fred, kick out here. Oh no! Oh no! When in comes to stay, E goes away.
So a great little video tool that the student had made to capture their understanding of that particular spelling rule. It could be very complex issues that the students are actually demonstrating. All kids love to YouTube and all kids love to vlog, so they're very comfortable in this space and demonstrating the learning that they have done in the classroom by using something like the smart recorder. So I've just got 2 minutes left before the end of the session. I just want to give you a little taster of next week's session. What we will be covering next week and what we've covered this week is just Notebook and some of the features of Smart Notebook. But next week the session is all about Smart Amp, and Smart Amp is that collaborative digital space, and what we actually have here is an example of Smart Amp. So I'm just going to navigate my way to my Smart Amp digital space, and this digital space was actually created using the Smart Notebook that you saw on the astronomy. And so the students had actually created, listened to that particular lesson or those series of lessons, and then the teacher has asked the students to go away and demonstrate in a digital space everything that they had learned about astronomy as a consequence of that lesson. So what we're able to do is embed the Smart Notebook, into this digital AMP session so they can review it all the way through from the beginning to the end, and then each of the students is able to contribute whatever they want to contribute into that digital space. So I can zoom in or zoom out on this digital space, and students can add videos, they can add content, they can add images, and so it's really a really great tool for the classroom, and hopefully if you come back to the session next week you'll learn all about Smart Amp collaboration tool, that it really is as a precursor or a consolidator on the learning that you may have done within Smart Notebook in any one particular session. So thank you very much for your time today. Crystal, were there any questions before we leave the webinar today?
There are. So Helen, I've got a question here from Zach. Does a high resolution image enhance the quality of the Zoom function?
Absolutely 100%, and that's why that exists there. So some of the artwork that is available on the internet, and it particularly if you have a high graphics card in your PC, you'll be able to really zoom in on brushstrokes of artists' work or maps of places around the Google Earth. So the magnifier function was definitely designed for that, but also to assist students in the classroom who may need to access the smartboard via a wheelchair and they need to zoom in on something specifically so that they can access it.
Next question comes from Vicky. Does a smartboard have an inbuilt speaker? She'd also like to know if we use the recorder while working on the smartboard, will the explanations be recorded?
So, first of all, the smartboard definitely has an inbuilt speaker, an inbuilt speaker that plays audio. It does not have an inbuilt microphone. So the microphone would actually need to be attached to your computer that's attached to the smartboard, and you can plug in a small microphone into your laptop and record sounds that the children are saying, so anything that they're going to say, and it will record everything they say and everything they do at the smartboard, provided that your computer is close to the smartboard.
Great. And just the last question here, how big are the files made in the record option? Have tried in the past, but the files were very big.
All right, good question. So in the lesson recorder, the files are very, very small and won't impact much at all because they're just recording things within the notebook space. But if you launch the smart recorder, what you would actually need to do to make those files smaller is use this small the menu drop-down action, and if you go to options, you can actually choose what kind of video quality and sound quality you want to have on your recording. So if you're recording a long session, obviously that's going to be a big video file. So I recommend that if you're doing something like a mathematics recording of a particular explanation, you'd actually choose low sound quality, and you'd also do a low frame per second, and then your video is compressed to a much smaller file if you need it to be longer rather than higher quality. Okay.
Excellent. That's all the questions as well, Helen.
Great. Well, thank you very much for your time today, and look forward to seeing you next week. Kev will be back and we'll be talking Smart Amp. Thanks for your time.